Welcome to the Simpleton Podcast. How are you doing, Laura Heeman?
Doing good, Clark.
All right.
You can't see this in Zoom, but in my other video, you can see our folding table, which has a big divot in it because a tree fell on it.
A tree fell on your folding table.
A big tree branch fell on it, and we have tree branches coming down in our yard.
Well, that reminds me of Simple House Thanksgiving when we put all the food on a folding table and the folding table collapsed and we had 30 people over for dinner.
That's horrible.
But the two-minute rule where if you pick it up off the ground in 2 minutes, it's clean.
That doesn't apply to cheese or gravy.
Yeah, but it applied to our whole Thanksgiving dinner.
Sweet potato casserole. Ew.
All of our guests were very kind to us that year.
Wow.
All right.
Okay.
This episode, we're going to do housekeeping, go over the crime I did to the Simple House community out here in KC. We'll talk about epic childhood, Twitter careers, women's sports, and vocations.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to get into the second part of the video, and we're very conscious now that we don't want to do too many doomer videos. So if you are not in for news that might make you a little bit perturbed, you can tune off at that point. We're going to start out with shark attacks, followed by Afghanistan, and followed by freedom of speech and thought crimes. All right. What's the first thought crime we should take?
Epic childhood. Okay.
Oh, the childhood. Yes, this is all going to be about childhood. All right. A friend of mine grew up in Wichita. Their mother was very concerned when they saw their stool. It was bright green. They called the pediatrician and said, "My child appears has something wrong. Their stool is bright green." The pediatrician said, "Have you been to McDonald's?" And the parent was like, "Yes." And they go, "Did you order a Shamrock Shake?" Yes. All right. Your child's okay. Apparently there was a historic, rash of pediatrician visits over Shamrock Shakes. I just did this to the whole Simple House community. We had a big Simple House party, and we have a buddy, Eugene, who runs an ice cream shop, and he hooked us up with 3 gallons of Blue Monster. And we also had a more healthy flavor next to it. And I ordered the Blue Monster.
Obviously, you get the Blue Monster.
Yes. Well, every child at the party wanted the Blue Monster. And even one of the parents giving out the Blue Monster was like, "If there's anything wrong with you, don't eat this. It might kill you." All the parents gave me grief all night long, blaming me for getting Blue Monster for their kids, which was just bright blue ice cream. My daughter woke up the next day and had to show me the stain of Blue Monster on her skin from the day before, And it basically turned everybody's bathroom situation upside down. So I'm still catching grief, but you have to do it for the children.
We have a kid at our school who really, his siblings can, but he cannot eat the food dyes because of specific issues. And it is very funny anytime he asks an adult, because everyone knows. So everyone's like, "Oh, no, go find your mom." We had a similar, we just went to Virginia Beach. We went to an ice cream place. I read that you had to have the Cookie Monster ice cream. And I told my kids that they had to get the Cookie Monster ice cream. It was delicious. It was awesome. But we had a similar thing. This is another warning. If you don't like bathroom humor, we should have warned people to not listen to this first segment. But the beach we that we do day trips to has a snack shack that is terrible. It's just like the Dot ice cream, or icy things, and where they pour the syrup over it. And I don't like going to this because it's $1 million and it's not substantial, but our friends were going. And so I had to get all my kids these blue icy whatever. And I was very mad because I was paying $50 for these sugar drinks, and they hadn't.
Why did you have to do it, Laura?
I know it was social pressure, and I gave in. But I was trying to be happy, for my kids having these drinks, and at some point they're just I don't feel that good. It was so much sugar, and I was trying to be happy. I was internally bitter. And we went to get in the car and Joseph just all over like the entire parking lot. It was blue. Like it was so disgusting. And he was like that. I don't want that ever again. And I was like, yeah, no, don't get that again.
I just think like there's so much like healthy stuff you can do for your kids, but like, shouldn't they have Lucky Charms once? And I don't know if I need to be the one who gives it to them. Maybe I need a drug dealer or something like that in their lives that does this. Maybe a grandma. Maybe that's the role of grandma.
Yeah.
You know?
I have Ryan and I were really moved one time. We were visiting the Bruderhof, and our friend there, the daughter comes back and is like, you know, at that time we were like, oh, our kids need to like not eat sugary stuff all the time. And our friend's daughter comes back from this like hike that their class had gone on. And the mom is like, oh, how was the hike? And she was like, all our lunches were ruined because of the rain. And the mom was like, oh, so you didn't eat lunch? And she was like, no. And she was like, what about the brownie? And we thought it was going to be like, well, I ate the brownie. And she was going to be like, well, you should have had the rest of your lunch, you know, if you could eat the brownie. And she was like, oh, yes, I ate the brownie. And the mom was like, oh, thank God. She was like so happy for her child that she got this like special treat that she had put in her lunchbox that was like special for that day. And we were like, yes, like that's like, let's be happy for our kids when they get these like special little treats. There is a barrage of special treats, which makes them not special. So,
that's true.
Yeah. And
I think that's right. There's something about childhood that is my favorite part, is that like to them, so much stuff is epic.
Yeah.
You know, because they just haven't done it before. And I used to do things when they were real young, like 3, I'd be like, let's walk around the block and see what's there, because you've never been there.
Yeah.
And then it's like, we saw a Dalmatian. What, you know, but like you get to participate in it with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like you're getting a refresh of reality because it's so fresh to them.
Yeah.
And it's always sad when it's always sad when a child is just like not impressed anymore with just reality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like an attitude you have to foster, I feel like, a little bit, but I always want to like, I feel like I've become almost the bad parent in a group of parents because I'm the one who is smuggling in the big league chew into the.
Well, I feel like I'm not going to buy my kids a bag of Skittles, but I want to be happy for them when they come upon a huge bag of Skittles all for themselves, you know?
Right.
But yeah, there is a thing that the bag of Skittles can become commonplace, and then they're entitled to the bag of Skittles. I don't know. So it's like keeping
or they
it
act
so
like
it's
nothing
like
ever's good enough or whatever, and then you're like really in a bad ruined spot, and you have to like somehow reform that attitude. No easy way to do that.
Yeah. We have another interesting thing though with candy. It's like we have a couple daughters that have a big sweet tooth, and the one we're kind of trying to like curb the sweet tooth, but she's started doing these like she kind of works over the old guys that are part of our like Knights of Columbus pool community, like the guys that don't have kids anymore, and she'll be like, Mr. Jimmy, have I got a deal for you? You know, she's like always like finding a way to like get candy out of these guys, you know, and it's impressive. And we're like, I don't know, it's like kind of a skill that she is developing that is interesting.
Well, to get this off of candy a little bit, there's been things in our ministry where we will do something, either a spring break with college students or with the poor. And then like 5 years later, that person will bring up that moment, you know? And if you think of how many days are in your life and how some of them stand out as very memorable, like first day of college or whatever it is, you know, it's always very special when you can be part of that with someone else, you know? And one of the things with children is you can kind of do that with your kids like a lot. You know what I mean? Like you could just like have this like day and you're like, they might remember this for a very long time. It wasn't that big a deal to me. But like whenever you can do that, you've done something really epic in my mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think about this sometimes when I'm like just like going shoe shopping with one of the kids one-on-one or something. And I have these like very strong impressions of like going shoe shopping with my mom and then out for a slice of pizza as like a very important part of my childhood, you know? And sometimes I'm like, just like, I'll be doing something that's so mundane and I'm like, oh, this might be like one of the kids, like memories of me, you know? Not my mom is still alive, by the way. Yeah, anyway.
And I think though that it also just as a parent, it's just cool. It's cool to be with them in that moment.
Yeah.
You know, that they're having this epic moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Switching subjects to X. I got sick this week. I had to lay around and I was on X a little bit too much. And I got sucked into motherhood Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Christian ladies on there from all over the types of Christianity, debating, you know, why hospital births versus home births.
Oh, boy.
Trying to think of other things, sleep scheduling, and every once in a while,
breastfeeding and all that.
And every once in a while, I want to like say, I don't know if any of this stuff is as important as we think it is.
Yeah.
And then I started like commenting like, just love your kids and give them attention and you'll be cool. You know what I mean? Like there's no secret formula to any of this stuff, you know? And I think that I need to relaunch myself on Twitter under a pseudonym where I just enter into mommy wars. And I should call myself Motherhood Perfecta.
Ooh.
Optimum Mama. And then I can't decide if I'm going to troll and like call everyone to a perfection that is so impossible that it breaks everyone, or if I'm going to just be the voice of calm down everybody. By the fourth or fifth kid, you'll realize it's not as important as you think, you know?
Yeah.
But I think the idea that I'm a man behind the account would be awesome. What do you think of this, Laura? Is this evil?
Yeah. No, I mean, yes. You're deceiving people.
Evil.
So yes.
Yeah, but that's kind of stirring the pot's what it's about. Good. I could even put in the profile, you know, that'd be so funny if the Mother Perfecta account's profile said dad. Anyway, all right.
Yeah. Because it's like you need to have like a very basic overarching theory of like, I'm going to love and enjoy my kids, you know. There are kind of minutia that you have to figure out. Like you just have to figure out what you're going to do about it. Am I going to let my kid read this book or not? And it can be challenging to answer those questions, you know, and people have strong opinions about whether your child should read that book or not. You just kind of have to choose, like, just choose. And
the truth that's not being like said adequately here is that like in marriage, in parenting, in the spiritual life, there's like a million unique equilibrium. You know, and you need to end up at a positive equilibrium and yours is going to be different than theirs.
Yeah.
You know, and like a parent that's really good at talking to their kids about serious issues is going to have a different set of books than a parent who relies a little bit more on the surroundings to form their kid, you know, or whatever. And it's infinitely diverse and complex. It's like, it reminds me, we just did Simple House training and we have a great set of missionaries this year. The part of mission work that is teachable is a very small minority of mission work, you know, and that's true of every complex thing, even teaching itself, you know, most of it's not teachable. Most of it can't be written down and just taught as a formulaic thing.
Yeah.
But what we do is like with this parenting stuff, we write it down like formulas as if it's like, okay, well, I don't know that you can write 10% of this down as a formula.
Yeah.
You know? So don't like cling to the 10% you can write down and act like you've got a hold on this problem, you know?
Yeah.
So somehow that's the problem, I think. It's like you really shouldn't tell anyone else exactly how a marriage should be because your marriage is going to be very different than theirs.
Yeah.
And same with their relationship with God. I mean, there's some things we know, like don't go murder people.
Yeah. There's healthy principles, like don't cheat on your wife, you know, or your husband.
But the diversity.
I'm sorry, that's more than a principle. That's, you know, but yeah.
I think part of this also is just having multiple kids. You start seeing that what works for one doesn't work for the other. And
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, where you're at in life, you deal with one differently than the other, and it's just going to be that way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You know, there's like a tiny bit you can control, and people want to control what they can control, you know, but yeah.
Well,
I
this
don't know.
goes into a broader discussion that we've had before,
Mm-hmm.
that like when you are kind of stressed out or want a handle on something, you want the problem to just be a job.
Yeah.
You want it to be like, hey, this is what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is executable. Go.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Most things worth doing are not jobs.
Yeah.
They like involve a lot of responsibility. They involve a lot of like nuance and things like this. Right.
Yeah.
And parenting is definitely that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a job. It's not like if you want this to be written down as a checklist in a job, you will fail.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? Embrace the part of it that's not a job. It's a responsibility and very, you know, I don't know, complex isn't even the right word, you know?
Yeah, I know. One of our children in particular as a toddler was like very sensitive to sugar. And there was a thing that like we kind of got into this mode, like he was misbehaving and we'd be like, what did he eat? You know? And it was just like, that's a very big oversimplification of like human behavior, you know, but it was like, had become like our like laser focus, you know, like, keep this kid from having a sugar high and low. And it was like kind of an oversimplistic explanation of his behavior, good and bad behavior, you know. But yes, like we were always trying to optimize his behavior by having him, you know, having well-rounded meals. It's a lot easier to just think about the meals than like forming a human person.
Right. And if we just say love, like we all know love can't be a to-do list.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think also there's a lot of like, it's like you can hit all the to-do list and have bad fruit, you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
It's also like God's interaction with us and us understanding God. If you try to boil God down to merely a theological, you know, model, you won't even be close to understand. You won't be very close to having a real relationship or intuitive understanding of the Lord.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that went a direction we didn't anticipate. You want to talk about vocations?
Sure. Yeah. I listened to a few weeks ago, I listened to a CFR, one of the Poco a Poco podcast episode about when you don't get accepted into their order or into the seminary, you know, more generally.
This is interesting for everyone who thinks they might have vocation. And for us at Simple House, we have to turn people away from our own ministry sometimes.
Yeah.
What were the...
And are also have a lot of people that are discerning, you know, vocations coming through here.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, two things that stood out to me is that they sometimes need to give people like a hard no, like a very, like not just like we don't think you have a call here, but like you don't have a call to religious life. Side note, the nuns need to do that more than the than the priests. But and then the other thing that was interesting that self-knowledge is best delivered in small amounts and by friends. It's not an exact quote, but and I thought that was an interesting idea that
But didn't they also say that they didn't want to accept people who didn't have a lot of self-knowledge?
I think they're trying to, when they are discerning with people, like see that people have like a capacity for self-knowledge and that they're kind of, you know, that they have been working on overcoming sin in their life and they have like a capacity to heal. Or I'm sorry, not just that they have a capacity, but that they have like healed some of the significant wounds that lead you to sin. And but I think
Are you adding a lot of interpretation to what they said there, or is that what they said?
Yes, I think they want people that have experienced some degree of healing and like integration in their life. You know, I think they think you need that to be in the religious life, and they value that people have been able to gain self-knowledge, you know? Yeah.
I find there's almost two different ideas being presented here. This idea of the firm no and like shutting down someone's discernment, which I find mostly right. And I find it troubling. And then the other idea is this idea of this insight and this integration and, you know, how someone's doing with all that. So one idea I have with the insight and integration is, like at Simple House, we need like to be a, you know, what I would think of as like an ideal missionary. You're going to take this monastic year seriously. You're going to really grow in self-knowledge this year and insight and all these things, right? You're also going to have like a spidey sense so that if we're sitting out into the hood, you kind of, I'm like, this is sketch. I need to get out of here, right? But we have had missionaries who, for whatever reason, didn't have the spidey sense.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had missionaries who have a very simple attitude, and it's not clear that no matter how long they sit in contemplative prayer, that they're going to like come up with some like deep insights or whatever. Yeah. But they're very beautiful people and inspiring, And we've had them have really great years as Simple House missionaries, even to the point that long after they leave, the poor are still talking about them, and they're like a little saint of our ministry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But they somehow lack this like thing you think of as like deep personal insight.
Yeah.
This interpersonal trait that is valuable, And it's also interesting to me that like when you look at religious orders, which we've been involved with in their formation a lot, Capuchin, Dominican, even Jesuit, some, and the diocesan priesthood, there's certain religious orders that have like a narrow band of like what they need, like you should not become an East Coast Dominican if you are not above average intelligent. Like if you're only average intelligent, you probably aren't going to fit there. You're going to have a hard time, in a lot of ways. You're swimming against the tide the whole time. And they're probably doing you a favor if they kick you out of the formation.
Yeah. And that's in the CFR podcast, they talked a lot about like desire, capacity, and call. And it's like when they're kind of thinking about your capacity to like live their life, do their work, exist in their community, they talked a lot about, it's like, we might say no to you because we care about you. We don't want to see you, like you said, swimming against the tide all the time, like struggling to make this. It's like, that's not a good.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking, though, that like there's these other religious communities I've been around, particularly the Benedictines, where the highest level genius is in the community and a very simple brother's in the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it makes sense. And it intuitively makes sense when you're there. And it wouldn't surprise me if someone went to the monastery and came away and their favorite person was the simple brother.
Yeah.
Or their favorite person was the genius.
Yeah.
And the community makes sense as like a body of Christ, that they just don't need the person to have either high IQ or tremendous insight or this certain personality trait. They can just take them, and give them a role in a sense and a way forward.
Yeah.
I find that interesting. And I find at Simple House that challenging because I know that we are not going to take everyone.
Yeah.
Like you need to fit a certain level, but I also know I need to challenge myself to take more than that because some of those people have become great missionaries.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing about this, though, is this idea of like the firm no, right? I have seen over and over again people who are fixated on, it can be religious life or it could be a romantic relationship. It could be like breaking up with a boyfriend, girlfriend type situation where they're like, tell me why.
Yeah. I don't really want to tell you why.
I know, but they want to know why because they want a to-do list to go personally work on so they can get the relationship back or get the vocation.
Yeah.
And it's just so not right.
Right.
And it's so like, actually, you just need to go grow. And if you grow back to the relationship or vocation, great. But really, that's not the goal of the growth. The goal of the growth is growth. Yeah. And that happens a lot with, that's like
a big sobriety thing. Also, I think like a lot of times it's like people will get sober to save a relationship and then it'll fall apart again. And it's like, that's like a big, like you have to do it for yourself,
right.
Because you want it, not, and then you're always kind of putting it on the other person. I used to have fun drinking, but
it's also a weird thing because it's making it like I didn't measure up issue,
Yes. Yeah.
And this is going to muddy this and not give us clear, conclusions. But like the thing I've noticed in Simple House community, and this is probably true in all religious community, is the person who screws up the community is the person not trying. Like we can have a depressed person. We can have a person who has all these problems.
Yeah.
But if the community believes the person's trying, the community is not bothered.
Yeah.
And as soon as the person has a problem and they don't even care, community is screwed up.
Yes. Yeah.
The thing I wonder, though, is like this idea that this person just doesn't have a vocation at all. I have met people who are so wrong-headed about vocation that they needed really that door slammed.
Right.
the question I have is like, for a lot of church history, this is not a very high vocation, but there've been a lot of like leftover people who ended up in religious life, you know? And I don't know that that was wrong. And like, we have a friend of the podcast who has struggled with homosexual temptation most of his life, and or orientation or what. And he's probably in his 40s or early 50s. And, you know, he's well converted. He's tackled the issue. He's done the work, but he's not going to get married. You know, he's not going to have a family. And he kind of has a interesting problem of what he's going to do with the last 30 years of his life.
Yeah.
You know, and I think this guy in particular, I think has got a solution, but there's a lot of people in there who maybe wanted to be married, but didn't. And there's not a reasonable thought that they will, you know? And historically, a lot of those people became religious, right? And it gave them structure, purpose, community, a community to grow old with, and all of that. And that doesn't sound wrong to me.
I agree with that. I think obviously, and you're not saying this, but like in the case of the CFRs, like they have a specific ministry, a very hard life. Like they have to be selective. And there's other orders that are maybe have a wider, you know, kind of, but I think I don't want to say that,
I want to give a counterpoint though.
I'm going to give a counterpoint. Okay. And that is like, most people that don't get accepted because they're not quite a good fit, not because there's something majorly wrong with them. But I think looking for psychologically healthy, well-integrated individuals who have kind of resolved their sexual sin has been an important step in dealing with like the sexual abuse crisis, you know? So,
the only thing that pauses me about what you said is that, you know, historically priesthood was for those people who were fairly far along in the spiritual life and ready to become pastors, right?
Yeah.
And religious life was the school of holiness for the broken.
Yeah.
You know,
yes.
And with the idea that the CFRs and these Franciscans were supposed to be taking people who were just desiring to heal, you know. Related to this, I talked to a guy who was in charge of CFR formation 20 years ago. And I think he led the order after that. But he said they could not take someone with homosexual orientation, even if it had never been expressed, even if they'd never committed a sin. And he said it was because it's not that the person wasn't worthy, it wasn't anything else. He was like, because you just never know what your limits are until you meet your limit, you know, and we can't afford to have one of those guys crack in our order.
Yeah, like within the
community. We can't afford the trip up, so we can't let the guy in.
I mean, they're also like, you can't be in our order if you're gluten free, you know. I mean, there's just like there are like some practical.
Right. I think we're overly focusing on the CFRs right now, but
yeah, but I think the general principle is, I mean, in a way, it's kind of logistical, you know.
Let me give a counterpoint to this idea that like people who kind of lacked a vocation end up in a religious vocation. I do see like a niceness to that. And I bet it's worked out for many people. And in other, like even St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, you know, as a widower became a religious. Well, did she have a vocation to religious life or to marriage? Well, both probably, you know. And I think there's people who really wanted marriage who probably ended up in religious life for some other reason. You know, maybe it didn't work out with the marriage and ended up with a great life, you know. But in the biography of St. Anthony Mary Claret, there's this interesting part where he talks about going into Spain, or when he's still in Spain, in that part of the biography, he talks about visiting convents, and that most of the women there would be like the unmarried daughters who'd been parked there. And then he estimated that was the majority of the religious vocations in this town. Yeah. You know, and he would meet a sister who had a real like fervent vocation, and she'd be like, just, it would mess up the convent for her because these people who were just parked there would literally have servants. Well,
like that, I mean, that's Teresa of Avila, right? You know, like she, right.
Like,
that's what she was dealing with.
It might actually be a decent solution for these unmarried daughters and give them a better life and a holier life than they would have had otherwise. But it does mess up the fervent vocation. And that's the same problem that Mother Teresa was encountering, that like all these religious orders who came into India were offering all the poor Catholic girls of India a status upgrade and material wealth upgrade by joining.
Yeah.
And she's like, I need to found an order so that they can be poor.
Yeah.
That the poor girls can be poor.
Yeah.
And so she had to do a new order because it was like, it like destroyed a real vocation.
Right.
You know, it wasn't going to work for them, those convents, you know? So I don't know. I don't know if that means there needs to be a diversity of convents or what.
Yeah. But, I mean, I think
it's not clear to me what the answer is there.
Yeah. You know, when we're like staffing our missionaries for like a year, maybe we get a person that is not the strongest candidate, but we're going to put them in a house with, you know, 2 or 3 really strong people, and that works, and it lifts everybody up, and it's great and it's awesome. And, but we have to be careful to not put 4 not the strongest candidates together.
That's right. Yeah.
And so
like, whenever we have a missionary who doesn't have that spidey sense, they're not going out into the hood without someone who does.
Yeah.
You know, like we can't just have a mission of just those people.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And you need people that are creative, and you need an organized person, and you need to have people bringing stuff to the table, you know, but, and I think there's like some religious orders that can take, you know, a bigger variety of people, and hopefully, you know, in 5-10 years, brother or a sister that was maybe a little bit difficult, you're seeing that person thrive, have a real role in the community, you know, and I love that. Like, I'm like, that's like makes me so happy.
I have a hard time talking to young people about this because they'll see like a very like austere order like the CFRs, and that's the top of the pinnacle, right?
Yeah.
And they'll see an order that more broadly accepts people, that's like got the simpleton and also got the genius, and that's not as attractive.
Yeah.
You know, but there's something kind of special about that order.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love I think the Capuchins have people all over the place, and I love that. A lot of different personalities, and I think it's like you can just kind of be a normal person and go there, you know? And I love that.
I think that's great.
Yeah. A normal person with a call, but
yeah. All right. If you're afraid of doomerism, you should turn off the podcast now, because we're getting ready to talk about shark attacks.
Or maybe you're just getting bored of it. But yes. All right.
All right. We're going to try to keep it moving, and we're going to be like news broadcasters.
Shark attacks.
We don't jump up and down and try to make you feel bad, but if it makes you feel bad. So.
All right. Last year, we had some missionaries that were really concerned about shark attacks. And I said, people don't die by shark attack that often. I also told them that you can fight off a shark, and I sent them a video of a man doing that.
I think that gives them a very reasonable expectation. All right. The thing is, it was interesting to me that I learned that they're lying to you about shark attacks, and they even are telling you
That's
this.
nuts.
It's public.
I spend a lot of time in the ocean.
So here's what they're doing. Shark attacks are actually about 3x the reported number.
Okay.
Not that means you shouldn't go swimming, but that seems to be the truth. They're very afraid of people blaming sharks for stuff.
Yes.
So whenever someone's bit by a shark, they go through this long list of like what happened, and they look for any reason that that this could have been a provoked attack. And then they're concluding only when there's no other reason that it's an unprovoked attack. And that's the number they publish. Yeah. So if there's 150 attacks, only about 50 are unprovoked. And that's about actually for Florida, that's about the number. It's about 150 shark attacks, 150 shark bites, but they'll report 50. Yeah. Right. And the idea here is like, if they find a body on the beach that has bites out of it from a shark and the person's dead and they were like a solo swimmer, that will not be a shark attack. Right. Like they could have died some other way, Clark. Yeah. They had a heart attack and the body was scavenged by sharks. Right. If there's been any fishing in the area, not a shark attack. The shark was just so delirious from the fishing, it killed your child. That was dark. But no, but anyway, this is interesting to me because you know, like a lot of times, like if a bear or a wolf or a shark attacks a person, they have to like go hunt down that animal and kill it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the issue partly. What's interesting here is that well-intentioned people are distorting data. And
for a message,
even though,
for
for a message, right? And the thing is when this happens, all data analysis afterwards is kind of useless.
Yeah.
Right. So this has been coming up in other ways too. For the last year plus, the job reports have been biased upwards.
Okay.
Or sorry, they've aired upwards. When I actually tried to do an analysis to prove bias, this is kind of coming up in a lot of talking points that we overestimated job growth last year by over 800,000 jobs. Okay. Wow. That sounds like a lot. I can't quite tell you that that's a bias though. And I don't know that that is a bias. But once you start distorting economic data, if that is a bias, everything's corrupt.
Yeah.
You know, I also learned something new about inflation that I feel really dumb for not already knowing. But so the normal way to measure inflation is consumer price index, which is a basket of consumables that consumers consume, right? Now, we know this is biased. We've known this is biased for a long time because we keep shifting what's in the basket, right? And we do that for good reasons and for bad reasons. So a good reason would be like an Xbox was not invented in 1990. Maybe it is invented 20 years later. Maybe people are buying it. So maybe it should be in the basket, like due to invention, right? A bad reason would be people can't afford to eat steak anymore, or as much steak as they did 20 years ago. So we're going to substitute it out of the basket and put in more pork. And then we're acting like that's real inflation. No, that's just trade-offs consumers made, and it's underestimated inflation, right? So that's been known. That's a bias, right?
Yeah.
Well, this guy pointed out, this British economist I've started following, he seems to be right about half the time, and it's pretty interesting when he's right. He goes, that's consumable inflation, but not asset inflation. Right? So like housing prices have gone up faster than rent. Okay. There's more inflation in housing prices than you see in rent.
Yeah.
And I think that's true in a lot of things right now, like the stock market and stuff, is that there's been a lot of inflation that we're not tracking because it's asset inflation.
Yeah.
And eventually it will become consumer inflation.
Yeah.
Like rent will eventually have to track housing prices more closely.
Right. And I think some years ago, it's like if you bought a house and had to move away for a temporary amount of time, like renting it out was a great option. But around here, you're losing money if you do that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying rent will go up to match that, you're saying.
And one of the themes of our podcast has been America for 40 years has been managed for asset owners, which you can complain about all that all you want, be utopian about how we need to fix that. What you need to do is make sure your family becomes an asset owner so that you're not swimming against the tide in your finances for the rest of your life, which first and foremost means own your house.
Yeah.
That's a PSA, public service.
I know, but that's a tough PSA.
Coming from,
it's a tough PSA to come
and
from
some
two
people
homeowners.
It means relocate, and I hate to say that, but like it's kind of desperate that you don't swim against the tide on this. All right. The other thing that's interesting data analysis that came out was people started passing around priests' sexual abuse claims currently against public school employee sexual abuse claims. And so I did a deep dive. I started looking up the claims that were being reported versus the numbers in each category.
And what was interesting, this before, but
we have talked about this before, but I hadn't done this. We didn't do this dive before.
Okay.
When you actually divide out claims to employees and claims to priests, it's so close to exactly the same number. It's insane. It's 0.0044 and 0.0043.
Wow.
Like, I mean, it's the same number down to just like, it's kind of incredible, right? And then the other two things that we've talked about before, but need mentioned are, I don't think the Catholic Church pays hush money anymore. I know the public schools do. So there's got to be claims that are not in that number, which would bias it. And there's also public school employees that never come in contact with kids who are in administration. So those people, to get a more accurate take.
When were these numbers from?
I was using my employee numbers from 2023. I was using the incident numbers from what was being passed around, which is very hard to gather that data. So I don't, like I said, with the hush money and everything, the data could be unreliable.
Sorry, that was the current
More or less current. Yeah.
For both the priests and the public school.
Yeah. Per year claims. And
I'm kind of disturbed by that on behalf of the church, but.
Well, I'm not disturbed on it because of the hush money issue and because of there's so many public school employees that aren't in the role of teacher, Yeah.
I think when I researched this a couple years ago, a researcher said that the public school incidents there were multiple factors why they were seriously underreported. And I think in the case of sexual abuse, like I think it's underreported because of all the shame that people feel around it in general. So I think that's like true often when it comes to sexual abuse.
To me, the obvious reason it's unreported is that you settle these cases and you pay the victim monies with NDAs.
Oh, I mean, also victims of sexual abuse don't often feel comfortable reporting it. That's right.
That's probably true in both cases.
Right. Yeah. It would be true in both cases. I think the reason why I find it disturbing is that I think the church has, for the most part, taken sexual abuse very seriously, the last 20 years. And what you are saying implies to me, am I right about this, that the sexual abuse was higher in the church previously to 2001 and now it's on par with the public schools? Or do you think it's just the same as pre-2001?
I didn't say anything regarding that. I would assume that it's lower than 2001 significantly. Yeah. I think it is because we've done a lot to root it out, and a lot has changed in the church, The thing that I'm just reporting was that, and by the way this affects you and the way this affects broader society are different. When these stats were put on for public comment, most of the comments are clearly the priests are doing more. There's just less priests. And then when I did the math and it came out that the rate is so exactly the same, 0.0044 to 0.0043.
Yeah.
That's astonishing to people, by the way. Right.
Yeah.
But then if you add in that there's probably a lot of NDAs in the public school stuff, now you're in the point where who knows what the truth is, but it probably is worse than the schools. That's my conclusion.
So disturbingly, I thought that was one of Cardinal McCarrick's talking points in 2001, that it's like the level of abuse wasn't higher in the church than in other.
What he literally said was it's about 2% of males who are pedophiles.
Uh-huh.
And it's about 2% of priests that are.
Okay.
So that was his kind of talking point. And that was this is not encouraging to me. But he thought of that as I think this is the difference between a Catholic hearing it versus a world person hearing it.
No, right. Because it should be better. But I think what he's trying to show is there's not a particular problem because of the religious nature of it or the celibate nature. It reflects... Right. But we should expect better, right? We should expect more of our priests than to reflect the, So I don't know. It is interesting that it's exactly the same. I sort of feel a little deflated by that statistic, though. So I'm a little bit surprised that it's the same, and I'm a little bummed out. But let me see if this is what. So my understanding is in 2001, it seemed like the church had this big sex abuse problem, and then as things kind of shook out, it seemed like the percentage of priests that were pedophiles and acting out on it was comparable, similar to the same number in other churches, other institutions, and in the general public. And so the problem was that, first of all, we expect more from our priests, but then all the cover up and the aiding and abetting was a kind of secondary layer of the problem of that explosion in 2001. But I think in a way, it was okay, well, great. It's not something specific about this celibacy or the priesthood that is creating pedophiles. That was helpful to find out at that time, I thought. But then we put all of these, different rules in place to try to protect from that kind of level of disaster happening again. And I think I had been under the impression that churches had become a much safer place for children compared to other institutions. And that's why kind of feel a little bummed by that number being exactly the same, although it is remarkable.
So you being bummed is because we've studied this issue, and I want to go back on that one more time. But when we're on social media and talking about this publicly, still the wider view of society is it's a bigger problem amongst priests.
Yeah.
So when I put these numbers out on X, because that's where this discussion was happening, people were shocked it was the same.
Really?
And there's reasons to believe public schools is far more, because we just compared priests to every public school employee.
Yeah.
I guess including janitors and, administrators and everything, and bus drivers and everything, maybe church employees to, public school employees might be better. There's also the issue of NDAs and hush money and things like that I don't think the church is doing anymore. But I do think the public schools are still definitely doing. They still haven't, had a reason to want to change that, And so for the wider society, it's shocking that the numbers it was kind of shocking to me that they were so close to the same, 0.044 to 0.043. Wow.
Yeah. So that is really interesting. One thing that's interesting is that it's like, people want to say like, well, no, the problem is worse. It's just there are fewer priests. Well, that's talking about like the percentage of bad priests, but the number of children abused, which I think is the more important number, is so much higher in the schools.
Yeah, kind of, you're right. And kind of though, like if one institution's erring at a much higher rate than the other, then it's more broken than the other, even if there's less victims.
No, I know. But it's like, I just want there to be like an appropriate amount of outcry, because 0.044 or whatever of public school children compared to children that go to church is crazy, right?
Oh, many more. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where the conversation had started online, was look at these number of cases versus the church cases. There's 100x more cases, but there's also maybe 100x more kids exposed, Yeah. So the thing though, is that by the way, if you're only started listening to Simpleton Podcast in the last 2 years, you may not realize that we did a long, long series on the sex abuse crisis early on, where we very much go through all the documents and stuff.
It was like a depressing 3 months of my life. So please honor that.
We're as lighthearted as you can be. As you know, we're your favorite doomer podcast. But, we tried to be as objective and as lighthearted as we could be. But, when 01 happened, 01's the real sex abuse crisis, not the one that happened in Pennsylvania, which was just a rehash of the old.
And yeah.
Well, the McCarrick thing was new information, but the Pennsylvania grand jury report was not really new information. It was just graphic information.
Subsequent ones, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so in the 01, there were a lot of questions. Like, I think our takeaways, if you don't want to go listen to 9 hours of podcasting, our takeaways were all institutions have systemic problems of hiding guilt and shuffling things around and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shocking that the church did it. But it's something that you'd expect in secular orphanages, in secular school systems, in secular institutions that deal with children also. And you do find it there in about the same rate.
Yeah. So and if you're an institution, you have to make special safeguards because it's going to happen otherwise.
Right. And so the church created a lot of special safeguards to solve that problem. The other thing was a human formation issue and a sample selection problem. So meaning like we then reformed seminaries and it worked. I mean, there's a massive change in seminaries since 01. We witnessed it firsthand at Simple House because we worked with seminaries that were literally shut after this. And the quality of guys coming out was very different. The formation they received was different after 01. Now, having said that, does that mean, I know that celibacy does not cause pedophilia. I know that factually, right? That doesn't mean there wasn't a problem before then, that pedophiles found the church a haven, that pedophiles may have been offering themselves for priesthood at a higher rate than they would in other jobs. That doesn't mean we weren't having that problem.
Yeah.
Because we were not rooting them out effectively, and thus creating a safe haven and thus creating an enormous, horrible problem,
Yeah.
So, all right. But now we're doing a much better job. And this data shows it's no worse than public schools, which shocks most people. I think you and I think it should be quite a bit better, not just because we're Catholics, but also because of all the reforms. And it probably is. There's probably a data problem on the public school side. It's very hard to collect that data. Yeah. And the whole point of this whole section, which is why we went from shark attacks to inflation to sex abuse crisis, is we're just talking about statistics and bias. That's the unifying thread of this section of the Simpleton Podcast. And after that, we don't need a unifying thread because we can start a new section.
Great.
Afghanistan. Okay. I have not vetted this section with Laura, so you're going to get her more or less raw reaction to this information.
Oh, man.
All right. I, by the way, think that some of the stuff that happened as the U.S. left Afghanistan is so bad I don't want to talk about it. And it's so bad that I don't think Americans could even tolerate a documentary being made about what was happening, you know. But there's an ongoing problem, okay? The ongoing problem is, like gangsters, the U.S. loads up a plane of cash every week, weekly. And the cash is between 40 and 80 million a week and flies it into Afghanistan and distributes it. Okay? And it's basically being taken up by the Taliban. All right? Now, the guy who broke this story is Sean Ryan. He's got a big interview podcast YouTube channel. And he was literally bringing on, you know, witness after witness of this. Everybody from people fighting in the Afghan resistance to people who worked for the CIA who had written books and were breaking it. And it was just like, he was horrified by it. He was actually an Afghan veteran. Mm-hmm. And he's like breaking this story in very long format, like 3-hour long interviews, kind of like Rogan style or whatever. And then the State Department admitted it. So the State Department has admitted that they're sending all this money and they don't know where it goes. Okay.
What's the reason for the sending the
so
money?
Let's try to figure that out. Okay. So I think, by the way, I've tried to figure out the reason why the withdrawal from Afghanistan went as badly as it did. It was always not going to go well, but the level of bad it did not need to be as bad as it was. But I haven't been able to get a clear story on why it was so bad. I had a good theory, but I've kind of been shooting down my own theories lately. The theory on this is, when we withdrew, we act like we're friends with the Taliban. This is the new Taliban, not the Taliban that was blowing up the Buddhists 30 years ago, or the Taliban that was harboring Al-Qaeda. New Taliban, great guys, where we can work with these people. They're reasonable Taliban. They're not. We knew that from the day we left. But we also thought, we don't want to admit that everything we did was a failure. We don't want to admit that all these girls' schools and all these projects we did to try to elevate the nation were a failure. So we need to keep funding them after we leave. So what we'll do is bring in untraceable money, cash, and distribute it to all these good non-NGOs, nonprofits that we've been building up 20 years that are now underneath the Taliban. And what the Taliban did is they just made sure that everyone who showed up to collect the money was one of their people, and they would kick it all back to themselves, and they basically get the money, right? But the U.S. government has a hard time taking critiques and has a hard time admitting when they're wrong, and has a hard time reforming and admitting that this was all failure. Therefore, they won't quit sending the money. They won't admit that this is what's happening. And it's so bad that when we talk to, like, when they interview like people who are literally fighting the Taliban, and they say, what would you like? How can the U.S. help? Their single request is, well, could you quit sending money to the Taliban?
Wow.
Could you quit subsidizing the Taliban? Right. So that's the story. And I don't know what to, it's just incompetent. Well, here's kind of, so I think we all know that this is like, so $40 million a week over 3 years is billions. Well, we can all just grieve on this, but the question is, what's the nature of this problem? Because I don't think any individual would make this, like we always are.
What I just like, I think this is half-baked people, so please forgive me if it's not. But for some reason, in human nature, bringing things to the light hurts, and we have an instinct to like protect, being justifiable, being correct, being right, and we'll dig our heels in, right? Like that's a thing that people do. And it's like, sometimes it's not even in line with like our own good, and we'll dig in our heels to do something that is like harmful behavior or whatever, because we don't want to be wrong and we don't want to be told we're wrong. What you're describing kind of sounds like, yeah, we did all these projects and we don't want to admit they were a failure. And you would think that, I remember I talked about this on one podcast episode, like a couple of years ago. There was like a study that people are more likely to lie in groups. And that's like the opposite of what I would have thought. But you would think that a bunch of people looking at the problem would shed light on it.
Well, it's the emperor has no clothes issue, right? It's like no one wants to admit that it's a complete failure and we're subsidizing the opposite of our value system.
Yeah,
right?
I also think a lot of times in groups, I mean, there should be people that are experts here, but a lot of times in groups, you feel like, well, I don't totally understand this, but all these other people do. So I don't know. I don't really know how to diagnose the problem here, but to think that groupthink might be an issue is not crazy, because what on earth?
Well, the question in my mind is, I think a lot of people will hear this and they'll assume that someone in the State Department loves the Taliban. So is the issue that there's a conspiracy to support the Taliban, meaning like actual individuals who love the Taliban who want to send them money? Or is it a complex evil, like a complex system problem that has to do with groupthink, that has to do with no incentive structure to quit the corruption? Like, which one is it? And I think it might be, I've started to wonder about like when we, at the end of World War II, the US had a role in reforming Nazi Germany and reforming Japan, Imperial Japan.
Yeah.
Right? And in each case, like we sometimes now hear about those things as like, with Japan, it's more mysterious to us, I think. But with Germany, the problem was Hitler, right? Mm-hmm. The thing is, when we killed Hitler, there was still a Nazi problem, and there's still a Nazi problem down to today. Yeah. Right. So Hitler was not like a lone conspirator problem person. There was a more complex system problem. Yeah. Right. And then the way we solved it was denazification, which was kind of a very cruel tearing it out of Germany and like, taking everybody who was in the regime and make them dig ditches and not letting them have any role in the future regime. Whereas like when we go into Afghanistan, we don't seem to have the same will, purpose, or confidence to do a denazification. I don't know that it would work in Afghanistan, but like if something was to work, it had to be radical like that. Also, when we went into Japan, we didn't view it as a problem of like a crazy general or a crazy emperor or a small conspiracy of people. We viewed it as like, we have to reform the way Japanese people view their government and get the religion out of it and do all that stuff, right? And give them a whole new purpose and way forward. And that's the most successful reform I've ever seen. So it's just interesting, like, because so many of our problems right now, the open question is this, can you actually explain this by complex, crooked systems? Or do you have to explain this by like evil conspirators? Yeah. And that I think is the most interesting question right now. I am siding towards, I'm more thinking it's the complex systems, but yeah, that I know I'm biased towards that too, though. So, all right. Are you ready for the next topic? Yes. By the way, this is all FYI. For your information, living in the world, know that this is stuff happening in the world. All right. Political prisoners and thought crimes. Okay. Someone has calculated how many, and I say someone because once again, we don't know stats. And I did my own work here, so I'll tell you what my work is compared to what this person reported. But the report is that essentially the UK has 10 times the number of people imprisoned right now for thought crimes than Russia, right? Just to give it context. And so a thought crime is like a Facebook post, okay? And so the number is close to 4,000 on the UK side and close to 400 on the Russia side. Those are approximates. Okay. I went back and looked. for arrests in the UK on this, like, for basically social media posts. And it's a lot. Like, it's like on a given year, I saw the number 6,000 as far back as 2015. I saw the number 4,000 from a few years ago, a year. Like, these are people like taken downtown and arrested for something they did on social media, right?
Wow.
And just in the last month, we know that they weren't allowed to put pictures or video of protesting in the UK on social media, or they would go to them and arrest them for it. All right.
That's nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, where's the Enlightenment? Where's the Enlightenment values? What's the Western tradition on this stuff? This is kind of wild. Okay. As far as I know, there's not anyone in the US currently in prison merely for a social media post. I don't know if maybe there is, but I doubt the number is above 100, you know?
Yeah.
And we're and by the way, we're, 5x the size of the UK.
Right.
So this is all happening. And then this other thing happened. France arrested Pavel Durov, who is the founder of Telegram. And I think that this story is kind of interesting, that everyone should kind of know the history of the story. So Pavel is born in the Soviet Union, got some experience of the West before the fall, went back to the Soviet Union with his parents after the fall. He's born in the 80s. And he founded a kind of a Eastern European Facebook. Mm-hmm. That was very popular, very successful in Eastern Europe. And as it got successful, the Russian government came in and tried to get him to give up user privacy, particularly for the Ukrainian accounts. This is a while back. This is before this whole Ukrainian war thing. And he was sat in a situation where he either had to comply and keep his company or sell his company and leave the nation, So he sold his company to someone who would comply, and he left. And he ended up in San Francisco, and he I assume he was fairly wealthy at this point, independently so, from selling the company. And he had to make the decision, like, what he was going to do next. He decided to found Telegram, which essentially, I'm not a user, but I've read descriptions. It sounds like it's almost like a text message service where if you agree to like a certain like group, then you'll receive all the messages from that group. So if we Simple As had a group, we could send something out to everyone who was subscribed to us on Telegram. Okay. And that it's private. Mm-hmm. It's hard to hack.
Yeah.
So he goes to San Francisco, starts a new tech company, and he has problems. He has problems that the FBI and the CIA want to sit down with him and talk to him about what he's doing and why he's doing it and if they can influence it. Do you want to summarize what Mark Zuckerberg just said about Facebook and Instagram?
Well, this had been kind of known, but I don't know if people were not believing it or whatever. But he just wrote a letter saying that the White House and and the intelligence agencies pressured Facebook to censor various issues related to COVID, Hunter Biden, etc., and that Facebook did, and that he regretted doing that.
And that's consistent with the Twitter files releases.
That's consistent with that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we know that the U.S. government does pressure social media platforms to give them access and influence.
Yeah.
And so he was receiving what he called bad attention, and he relocates his company to the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. By the way, I found out what an emirate is.
What is an emirate?
And it's a very small country, but an emirate is a region ruled by an emir. And then when you go to their Facebook page for the UAE, not Facebook, sorry, you go to their webpage, they have all the royal families of the UAE. So each one of these tiny emirates has their own royal lineage, and the United,
like a duchy, like a duke or whatever.
Right. The United Kingdom is actually United Arab Emirates is kind of the same thing as the United Arab Kingdoms, And so they each have their own still little royal family in these each little emirates. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And so he moved his company there to Dubai. And the UAE is trying to grow its economy outside of oil pretty hard. So they're probably pretty happy about this. And he gave an interview and he talks about this move in order to kind of get away from the superpower pressure, essentially.
Yeah.
And he says that he's very careful about where he travels because he can't go back to Russia. He can't go places where they're going to try to imprison him to get influence on Telegram. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So he just got imprisoned in France. And at the time of this podcast, he is now out on €5 million bail.
Oh my!
And cannot leave the country in France. But he was imprisoned for a few days there.
Wow. And why did he get arrested?
They claim because something bad has happened on his platform. Okay. Which we know many bad things have happened on Facebook's platform. Yeah. We know many bad things have happened on many platforms, but they're holding him liable for that. Right? Okay. And a lot of these governments even use his platform. So it's not like only bad actors use his platform. There are good actors, and we actually don't know why he's imprisoned. You know, there's this kind of weird thing that's come out about intelligence communities that they kind of work with each other. Like there's evidence that like when the US doesn't allow torture, but we're willing to like arrest someone and give them to a country's intelligence community that does allow torture and then let that happen. We're also, intelligence communities can call their brother organization in another country to research their own citizens, which maybe they're not allowed to do. Like the CIA is not allowed to, go after Americans, but they can call the French and have the French go after one of the Americans. And they can swap favors like this. So we don't know if France is the main person who wants this guy imprisoned.
Yeah.
So the UAE responds by canceling a fighter jet order worth billions, that they had ordered from France. They had ordered 70 of the French fighter jets. They just canceled the order.
Wow.
So the UAE is sticking up for this guy, which made me wonder, how weird is it that this Arab kingdom or United Kingdoms is sticking up for enlightenment values here? So I started researching that, and they actually don't have freedom of speech in the UAE. But they do value their citizens and they do value people who bring business there. So they are going to fight for you, and that's kind of interesting.
I mean, I think all of that is disturbing. I just, to a different extent, make parallels with Puerto Rico attracting foreign businessmen. But
so the main, topic here is really the problem of like persecuting thought crimes and the problem of privacy and stuff like this. And it's interesting that for almost all human existence, we could actually like be private, but we couldn't be that effective. It was basically words or a written letter or something.
I mean, written letters were certainly intercepted though. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it wasn't illegal to send them, It wasn't like they all had to be monitored.
But there could be treason in the
could
letter,
be intercepted.
and you would try to intercept certain.
You could have people
others.
Up at the keyhole listening.
I think that the mind has been the only private place,
I disagree with that.
I don't know.
The fact that you can, like what Edward Snowden revealed, that they monitor every cell phone call, essentially.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. No, I don't know of any, if you're monitoring every letter, that's crazy too,
Yeah.
And the idea that we're now entering an age where it's intolerable to have a private messaging system that's weird. It's also weird, this weird thing that's happened where Biden historically doesn't give interviews. Even after they bomb a new country, they won't like have a press conference about it, or he won't come face the media over why he bombed them. This happened in Syria right after he got elected. He bombed Syria and then he wouldn't answer any questions.
Yeah.
So he kills people and won't be responsible enough to answer questions about it while trying to control someone else's speech. Kamala Harris now is, running for president and won't do interviews. I think she's done maybe one interview that was edited with a friendly organization and Tim Walz beside her, but has gone like over a month running without doing interviews, right?
Yeah.
And while actively censoring other people's speech. So it's like both not speaking and trying to get other people not to speak. And this is wild. This is completely inconsistent with democratic values. So that's the main point, right? The other thing, though, that kind of I'm just fascinated by the UAE a little bit. The Roman Empire like sold citizenship. And like you see this with Paul, like Paul is a citizen of birth, and then there's other people who bought their citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm kind of a Lawrence of Arabia. He's one of my most interesting historical figures, and he made this argument to the British government that they were messed up in the empire, that they should have been selling British citizenship and not giving it away. And he goes, and the Arabs don't even understand what you're doing by giving it away, because how can you give away something of value like this, right? Yeah. And it appears to me that the UAE, at least for the rich, is selling citizenship where it's like, look, if you're on our passport, we'll fight for you, and we have enough economic power to do something.
Yeah. They don't fight that way for their natural citizens, so.
Oh, I bet they do. I'll tell you who they don't fight for here in a second, because they've got some human trafficking problems. But like the US would kind of do this too, which was kind of incredible, that we'd have 300 million people and you'd get stuck in some little country somewhere, and the US actually did a pretty good job of getting you out, and we had enough sway to do that. And I think that's all disappearing because our superpower status and everything's disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think if you get stuck in Afghanistan, even though we give them $40 million a week in cash, I don't think they're getting you out.
Yeah, right.
But my point though was, the UAE. So they're kind of selling their citizenship, and their citizenship seems to have real value, and I wouldn't be surprised if more companies relocate there. The other thing though was they also kind of don't really do it for the Western Enlightenment reasons.
Yeah. Just like economic gain or what?
I don't know. Yeah, I'd say probably economic gain's the reason. Yeah. But they have this the problem that I don't think this is just the UAE who did this, but they would go into like countries that were poor, like India, or go into poor areas of India or Bangladesh or whatever, and offer jobs in their country. And then upon arrival, they confiscate all the passports, put 30 guys in the house, tell them they have to pay for their way back, don't give them the job that was promised, and basically making them work construction in horrible conditions, and the guys can't leave because they don't have a passport, and they're basically creating indentured servitude. Yeah. It's kind of it's slavery, right? So they're both doing that on one hand, and then like inviting billionaires as, citizens on the other. Having said this, I'm very happy that they're sticking up for this guy.
Yeah.
I think, by the way, when you said, do they stick up for their own citizens? I think they almost have no citizens. I think they're just very lowly populated.
Okay.
And I think given their oil wealth, they probably do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I think issue in Puerto Rico right now is that there's like tax code for foreign businessmen to try to entice, people to move to the island. And but the tax code doesn't benefit Puerto Rican businessmen. Right. And we need a stronger Puerto Rico with strong Puerto Ricans in it, but yeah.
Well, I don't think we have any, we just needed to tell you that the shark attacks are larger than you think, and just give more information out there to the Catholic world.
Scared. Yes. There's also there are more YouTube videos though on how to deter a tiger shark from attacking you. So watch those.
Have you seen the guys who do that with crocodiles too? They like swim with crocodiles, and they have this way of like dealing with them that like keeps the crocodile from like reacting. Yeah. What are you doing?
They're just waiting to get eaten. I think
I know. Like, how do you do like trial and error on that?
I know. So there's actually a thing like there's like these tiger shark tours, and like there's some people that just seem to like intuit animals better than other people, and so it's like you get these people that sort of understand tiger sharks, right? And they study them and they intuit them and they sort of behave in a way that's comfortable. And you watch a video and you think, oh, I can do that. But then when you see all these people going on these tiger shark tours, they're all just like seconds away from, having their head chomped off. But like, it doesn't look graceful and beautiful and whatever, like the other tiger shark influencers, which there are many of, and I follow all of them.
Tiger shark influencers? Mm-hmm. You're into this?
Oh yeah.
Would you let your kid become a tiger shark influencer?
I would counsel my child against it.
The way to go big is to be a tiger shark influencer who becomes a great white influencer.
I think tiger sharks are more aggressive than great whites.
I'm telling you, I'd watch the great white influencer. I'd watch the guy holding the nose.
Tiger sharks are huge. Like, they are enormous.
You're telling me a great white influencer would not be more popular than a tiger shark influencer?
Yeah.
You've bought the propaganda of the tiger shark.
I bought the propaganda. No, I'm just like, if you were going to be impressed by a great white influencer, I don't know why not a tiger shark influencer. Well, also, I do think there are some of the tiger shark people also dabble in the great white, but
here's what I don't know, right? Like, I deal with people who sometimes have like bad mental health issues, right? I have literally had like 99 good encounters sometimes with a certain like schizophrenia, right? And the 100th one is absolutely terrible and makes me realize I had a much greater threat during the first 99.
I do think that all of these people are in the same exact boat, and
and they're waiting for their 99th issue. Yeah. For the tiger shark that happens to have a dead nerve on its nose, and when you tap its nose, it doesn't care and it eats you. Go ahead.
You see these people like push. It's not just tapping them on the nose. They like literally, they like push and redirect the sharks away from them. You're like, okay, I could do that. If a tiger shark was swimming right at me, I could do that. But once I was out in the ocean and like a little pod of dolphins like literally surrounded me in a ring, which sounds awesome. And it was terrifying. It was so scary. I couldn't believe how big they seemed out there. It was still awesome, but it was shocking how scary it was. I was not prepared for that.
It's shocking how well they move in the water and how even the best human does not move well in the water.
Oh, well, that too. But it's just like there's this enormous, powerful, muscular beast and its little pup swimming next to me. There were like 8 of them maybe. And there was a baby one in there. And I'm like, I don't know what these things are going to do. But if they decided to turn against me, I'm a goner.
Right.
But yeah.
And most shark attacks happen in cloudy water. So you're not like, you'd have to like find, feel them out while they're biting you, push them away, I guess.
No, well, anyway. Okay.
I know you could do it. I know you could do it.
Oh yeah, I could do it.
You would also be like a Hall of Fame roller derby queen. Laura. We know this is true.
Even though I was afraid of that baby dolphin, I could totally fight off.
I mean, you would have. Well, you don't know about dolphins, but you do know about tiger sharks, so you're much more prepared.
No, I'm saying I do know about dolphins. I was within feet of dolphins.
And I'm telling you, you can handle a tiger shark. So what's the problem?
I know that. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. In fact, if we ever go fishing, I expect you to jump overboard if we see one. Thank you for listening to the Simpleton Podcast.
See you later, Clark.
Bye.
Goodbye.